At present, the only television available in Papua New Guinea comes from outside sources. The agreement signed at the weekend in Port Moresby's historic Government House provides for full-scale commercial television stations to be operating within 12 months. Sydney is a project agreement giving the NBN Television Network to go ahead with start operations, where the Governor-General, Sir Kingsford Bella, the Chairman of the Curry Corporation, Mr Kevin Curry, and Mr Joe Sweeney, the General Manager of NBN 3. NBN will develop and manage the station. Curry Corporation will hold an initial 66.7% interest in NBN, the remainder of the shares being held by local Papua New Guinea companies and individuals. At the signing ceremony, Mr Curry said NBN programs will include a high degree of local content, including local...
But in those days they didn't...
The house in Elbrook Drive belongs to Paul and Iris Hughes.
Mrs. Goodbye to her, and I thought, will I go to tennis or will I stay? And I thought, no, I'll have a cup of coffee. Made myself a cup of coffee in the kitchen, just sat down, turned around, and there's smoke pouring down the hallway. I ran in through it to see, because it wasn't very thick then, where it was coming from. It was coming out of the top of the girls' wardrobe. Well, no one had even been anywhere near the top of the girls' wardrobe. So I thought, oh hell, I raced outside, yelled for the fire brigade from the next door neighbour, who couldn't see any smoke or anything at that stage, and raced to get a hose, which was very heavy and caught up. But by the time I got it into the kitchen and started to spray it, the fire had come down the hallway, was in the 2 bedrooms, and I couldn't get through the kitchen.
Although firemen were quick to respond, the fire spread rapidly and engulfed the front half of the house. The rest has been damaged by smoke and heat. Mr. Hughes, a timber merchant, had only just finished renovating the kitchen. The family of 2 teenage boys and twin girls spend the next few days at their grandmother's house until arrangements can be made to repair the damage.
Commercial area bypass, involving a roundabout at the corner of Stockton and Dowling Street and the extension of Dowling Street. That would cost the developer $296,000. The Shire Clerk, John Wallace, said today that those...
If the application is successful, I think it...
those placed on the council's own Salamander project. The debut Newcastle performance by the Sydney City Ballet was a piece called, appropriately enough, Ballet Egyptienne. Appropriate because the company's principal male dancer and artistic director is Cairo-born Hassan Sheeta. Hassan was one of those who formed the company from the bankrupt ruins of the Sydney City Ballet last year. He brings a wealth of experience to the new company, having danced with the Cairo Ballet, the Frankfurt Theatre Ballet, the Zurich Ballet, and the Sydney Dance Company. The principal ballerina in the piece and the 4 other pieces that were performed last night was Faye Higgins, who also performed with the Australian Ballet and the New Zealand Ballet. Last night's show will be followed with a performance in Tamworth. The company hopes to do much more extensive tours in future and bring the glamour of ballet to the whole state.
Subsidies, but they do need some proper...
The crucial first step towards establishing the system was made last night when a public meeting was held at the Port Stephens Council Chambers in Raymond Terrace. Amongst those on hand was a representative of the Department of Social Security, which controls the scheme. He defined the aims of CISC as to improve the chances of the unemployed up to the age of 25 of gaining and retaining work, and to make them more self-reliant. It is estimated that there are about 1,000 young unemployed in Raymond Terrace who could benefit in those ways, but who have to travel to CISC schemes in Nelson Bay or Maitland. Judith Driscoll works for the town's neighbourhood centre, and she organised the public meeting because of numerous requests for the scheme.
Raymond Terrace needs a CISC much because we have a lot of unemployed youth in this area who are very isolated from any kind of facilities at all. There's no transport to get them to the reasonably close CISC schemes that do exist, and so that just basically means that they have no affordable way of getting to do anything of that kind at all.
You'll be applying for federal funding for the scheme. What do you think your chances are?
Well, I hope our chances are very good. I know we're competing with a lot of other areas that deserve to have CISC schemes as well, but I think that given the very fast-growing area, fast-developing area that we're in, and the lack of suitable transport of any kind to get people to facilities that do exist, I think we've got an excellent case.
The establishment of the much-needed Markview Road High School was celebrated in an ecumenical service in the school hall. Since the school started in January, it's received much help from the Parents and Citizens Association, and there were many of these supporters there to witness the dedication service. At the moment, there are only Year 7 students, but within 5 years, it says there will not only be a full school, but also a permanent brick building. Principal David
The plans are that the demountable buildings will or should remain for 4 to 5 years, and at the end of that time, hopefully, and I hope, and the staff hope, and the community hope, that it will be replaced by a brick and mortar building that will still occupy the same site, but just further up to the top end of our existing block.
Obviously, the need is great for a second high school in Cessnock.
Well, very obviously it is. Cessnock High enrolment approached 1,400. I think Curry High was in excess of 1,200, and this school has eased the strain on those two schools. Hopefully, Cessnock High and this school in a few years' time will wind up to have a population of each around about the 800 to 900 students.
Workmen were on the scene, laying only an hour earlier, a Tallman's Company truck carrying dozens of tins of red paint had been travelling south when it swerved to avoid a car. The paint in the tins was splashed across 100 metres of road and wood. The village left authorities with quite a problem. Not only is the paint toxic, but it's flammable and difficult to dispose of. That's because the paint has a deadly lead oxide base. Simon couldn't simply hose it away because it was contaminated with water forces. Instead, the sand soaked up and the green marble began a painstaking task to cover it into the truck. Late this afternoon, authorities had not decided what to do with the paint-soaked sand.
Court complements the hostel and 2 independent living courts contained within the Old Church Close retirement village next door. The residential block was purchased by the Uniting Church 2 years ago, and all of the 5 staff apartments have now been filled. At the official dedication ceremony, the chairman of
but of course the buildings, the location were all very important, but it takes more than
resulted in the development of the church with distinction.
Or if you kept the order of service, you will remember that there was something on the order of service, a pleasurable experience to dedicate it to the glory of God, to the service of mankind, another expression of real Christian caring.
The controversial halfway house sits in Conrad Close, Charlestown, the heart of a residential area. Its planned use was discussed by a protest meeting at the Charlestown Primary School, organised by the Suburbs Action Committee. Residents are angered that the state government's new policy of taking juvenile offenders out of prison-like institutions will place some of those juveniles in their midst. Residents fear for the safety of their homes and their children.
Well, the reasons at the moment, one, residents are very, very worried about their safety. We're worried about the adequate supervision of these supposed first-up offenders. We're worried about how these offenders are going to be chosen. And of course, lots of the residents are also worried about the devaluation of their properties.
If schemes such as these for first offenders are continually opposed by residents, where do you suggest they go?
Well, if they're continually opposed by residents, I think we'd have to assume that youth and community has to rethink where they're going to place these homes. I would probably suggest that they pick new areas where houses aren't established, so that when the people buy into those areas and establish their homes, they're fully aware of what they're buying into.
Special guest at the meeting was the Shadow Minister for Youth and Community Services, Virginia Chadwick, who doubts the government's assurances that the juveniles will not pose a threat.
The department is very fond of saying that the people going into these houses will not have committed serious offences. At no time have they been prepared to give a definition of what they mean by a serious offence, and I very much suspect that what they mean by a serious offence is not what I might mean by a serious offence. For example, one could move into a newly developing land comm estate or some other form of new estate.
Bob Brown believes Australia needs a very simple, equitable and efficient taxation system, and admits if that isn't achieved from the White Paper and Taxation Summit, his position and that of the Hawke government will be on the line. On Friday he slipped the centre left by publicly stating his opposition to any form of death duty or wealth tax, saying they are exercises in electoral lunacy, and he's also expressed his doubts about the acceptance of a consumption tax. The consumption tax, he believes, will become a reality. He's equally confident that the death duty proposal has been buried.
I think people probably have become confused, and I think they have probably become fearful as well of the types of changes that have been proposed. But I think now, as we lead up to, after the issue of the White Paper tomorrow, and then in the lead up to the summit, and then after the summit, and before the government needs to determine its final position in relation to this, to make sure that they have some input. Here is their opportunity. If they miss it this time, it will never occur again.
Some people may say that simply tampering with this very sensitive issue of taxation could amount to electoral suicide anyway.
If as a result of community reaction, adverse reaction, it's necessary for the government to retreat completely, as it well may do, if the community reacts very strongly and very adversely, then we will have dispelled for all time the opportunity of any government pursuing this question. No government in the future would have sufficient courage to do anything about it.
Gary Meatherall went on an inspection of the existing low-level bridge along with members of the Torres Progress Association. Spokesman Bill Werner outlined the background to the decision, including the road knowledge Brereton's decision in March to go ahead with the existing span bridge under the Newcastle Region Road Improvement Programme. The Hunter District Water Board is in the process of carrying out preliminary work for a second bridge by relocating the main Strait water to Swansea. Although Mr Meatherall's involvement in the bridge issue is at a late stage in proceedings, he voiced concern about what he said was the state government's lack of consideration.
So I'm still hopeful there is time for a change. But really the Minister's got to face up to the fact that these days assessments have got to be made and you've got to have public inquiries. You can't just railroad proposals through the local community.
Preliminary construction is already underway. Do you honestly think you're going to achieve anything at this late stage?
Well, I don't think the locals are going to lie down on this issue. There'll be a further public meeting tonight and I'm sure there'll be further protests right down to the end. And the Minister's not going to have this issue just pushed aside by the beginning of preliminary work.
Despite the opposition's new interest in the issue, the second low-level bridge for the Swansea Channel is poised to go ahead. There is concern that already its construction is inevitable. However, lobby groups are determined to continue with their protests.
We feel that our case is so strong for an alternative route for the highway through Swansea that even at this late stage the Minister would agree to meet us and to hear our case for an alternative crossing for the Swansea Channel.
Contrary to popular belief, whale strandings along the coast of New South Wales are common. However, rescue attempts of marine animals have been hampered by the lack of equipment and knowledge concerning the correct rescue procedures. The new ship which arrived at the Ranger Services office only last week is one of 4 that have been distributed along the coast. The others are located at Grafton, Torres and Medina.
We got the kittens in that. I don't even know, but we had to send get the kids picked up and taken up.
Although basically designed,
lots of information, a lot of historical information, and as well as the fact that a large carrying net, a plastic sheet with handles, so that whales and smaller whales, especially, can be handled, rolled onto the sheet, and then people grab hold of the handles around the side and move them.
Is there any real need for such a rescue kit? How many strandings have there been in the area?
We've had one stranding about August last year on Port Stephens, but because of poor communications we didn't know about it until it was too late. Another one out on Broughton Island. They're both in the last 9 months. Now, if we'd known what we know now and have the gear that we have now, I think we'd have done, probably had a good chance of doing something about those whales.
We've been off the paddock virtually for 5 weeks. We've been doing our time in indoor cricket centres, trying to run on the road, and as you know, a lot of the guys these days suffer from shin soreness, things such as that, so it's not good for them. But we are considering, even at this stage, of changing the lineup for tomorrow because of the conditions.
Liz, you were closely connected with lakes for a long while, 10 years or so.
10 years, yeah.
And you'd like to beat them, and in fact you pulled that off last year.
Yes, it was a thrill for us last year, and actually it was one of the biggest days for Waratah Club, really, the way they celebrate that day. But the personal thing, I think it's just everyone takes that into the game, and the old club, I think they'd like to say that to those people, well, you know, maybe I should have got a bit of a go while I was here.
Both in
Newcastle is nothing short of a major coup. It marked this morning with a civic reception shortly after Jahanga's arrival from Dubbo. The only other person lucky enough to see his considerable talent during the becoming Australian tour in 1985. Jahanga is one of a long list
on behalf of our sponsor, the Greater Newcastle.
But now actually I play two types of game, which is longest game and like fitness game, and I try to play a strokes game, which is normally or natural, I would say, Pakistani style, and I learned the both way actually. And the squash is the age limit, you know, for the game, and I mean, I would say like Jeff did for 8 of 35. And if I go for that long, I think it's another 16 years to go.
And another Khan to follow.
Well, I've got my nephews and cousin to come up, and they're already playing. They already playing squash at the moment, and I hope they will come up.